Okay, welcome to another video. So what we're going to be doing today is taking a look at a distribution which we have seen on the channel once before, quite a while ago now, which was Linuxfx. So for those of you who aren't aware, Linuxfx aims to be one of those distributions which is kind of like a drop-in replacement for Windows for Linux users, even down to the entire design aesthetic of the desktop. And in the first video we did, they did a really good job of kind of fooling the user into thinking that this is actually a Windows machine. And since then, they've released newer versions with newer features and even a Windows 11 kind of like layout. So I'm quite interested to see how far this has got. Now, usually this wouldn't be my kind of distribution, but I do find it interesting the allure of these operating systems have, and I can tell that just by the metrics of the previous video that we done. So I'm definitely quite excited to check out how far it's came since our first video. So what we're going to do first of all is just have a quick read of the sort of website and the features that are included in the newer versions, and then we'll jump straight into it and get this installed. So we have a friendly interface, so you can take advantage of all of your knowledge immediately. Linuxfx has the same interface as Windows 10 from Microsoft, and now with the newer version it has a Windows 11 image, which is what we're going to be looking at today. So we now also have Android support, so we can run Android apps and games, install thousands of apps via the Play Store. Interesting. Office 365 and 3D games are now supported. Okay. So we have Microsoft applications. So Linuxfx natively brings the Edge browser, Teams, Skype, PowerShell, Office Online, Code and more. And then we have the WX desktop interface. So this brings all of the main tools of Windows 11, and this includes the control panel, configuration screens, login, logout, etc. And then we have a personal assistant, which appears to be underlying using sort of Google Assistant technology. So we'll see how that all works. And then of course with Wine7 it brings sort of compatibility for .exe and MSI applications. Now the version that we're going to be taking a look at in today's video is the Linuxfx 11 Professional, which as you can see from the image here, if you were just having a glance at that and weren't reading the names of the application titles, I think it's reasonable to assume that you could be quite tricked into thinking that is indeed a standard Windows 11 install. Now in our previous video I do believe we checked out this bad boy right here, which was the Windows 10 version. However, I think when we checked it out, it was still using Cinnamon, and now they do offer the Plasma and Cinnamon versions, and we'll be taking a look at the 11 Plasma version. Now, as we can see here, there are free and professional editions. So the free edition will get you all of the operational features and use of all the WX desktop resources for a limited 30 days. Now, as I want to check out everything, I have actually reached out and asked them for sort of a professional key, which they have kindly obliged. So we're even going to be testing out the activation process in today's video as well. And Linuxfx itself is of course based on Ubuntu. Now I've already downloaded the ISO, so we're pretty much ready to go. And the ISO is quite large, I think just over 4 GB. But with all of that being said, let's jump into the live environment and get this installed. So even when the distro is booting up, we can see that we've got kind of like the Windows vibe here. Right, so here we are in the live environment, and as you can see, it really does do a brilliant job of making you just feel as if you are in a standard or Windows 11 install. Now we won't remark on it too much, we'll go ahead and get this installed natively, but for those of you who do like to skip the installation parts of these videos, there will be a timestamp down below which will take you straight to the installed desktop. But with that being said, let's get this installed. Right, so it appears that we are using the Calamares installer. So first up, all we need to do is change our language from American to British English, and then we can go to the next step, which is going to be our region, and we'll just plant ourselves right about there and then go to the next step, which is going to be our keyboard. So it's already selected UK for us, and we'll just make sure the keyboard is behaving itself, and then we can go forward to the next step. And now we're just going to do a straight erase disk, and I'm quite interested to see how they actually do partition our drives and whether they just use a standard kind of layout similar to Ubuntu. And it does appear to. So as you can see here, we have the one EFI partition there, and then we have our main partition with the root file system of ext4. So I imagine perhaps they are indeed going to use a swap file, but we'll check that out once we are at the installed desktop. So let's press next. And now it's time to create our user. Now I'm not going to log in automatically because I want to see if they've done anything interesting with the login screen. So we're just going to go straight forward with the install. And here's where I'll pause the video and come back once it's finished. And there we go. So the installation has completed without any issues using Calamares on my machine. So we can now reboot and check out our freshly installed Linuxfx 11. Right, so here we are at the login screen, which from what I can tell appears to be using just SDDM, but themed to give you that Windows 11 kind of feel. So let's log into the desktop and start taking a look around. Right, so here we are. Now I think what we're going to do first of all, before we start taking a proper look around at things, is as you can see here, we are running the free version, so I am quite intrigued to see how the activation process works. So if we open up the menu here, which does look strikingly like the start menu for Windows 11, we have this button here called Linuxfx Register. So I'm just going to pause the video while I get up the email that they've sent me for the sort of registration key, and then we'll go ahead and register this for the Pro Edition. Right, so I've just copied over the serial key from my server, so it should now be in the Downloads folder in our Home folder. So as you can see here, of course, your default file manager is going to be Dolphin, as we are using KDE Plasma, but they've done a good job of theming it to make it look a little bit like Windows here. And of course, we have the rounded corners as well. And then we have the icons here, and interestingly, we do have a OneDrive one, so we'll see how that's all set up as well. Now, I do think Plasma is the best desktop to try and get this kind of look and feel, because of course they support all of the sort of customizations and sort of nice native blur effects and all of that good stuff. But let's go into our downloads folder, and there we go. So we have the purchase note. So I will blur out anything that we don't want to see there, but what we are going to do is get our serial key ready. So I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard and then leave it minimized for the rest. Let me just grab this key here, copy that bad boy, and let's just minimize this window for the moment. And now going back to the start menu, we are going to click to register Linuxfx. So your device is communicating with Linuxfx servers. Please wait a few moments. Even the product key looks like a sort of Windows activation product key. So your product key should be in the email sent by the person who sold or distributed Linuxfx. So I should be able to copy and paste that over. Of course, I will blur out anything. So we're now going to press next and see if this is going to go ahead and activate our version. And there we go, as simple as that. So I guess they've just got sort of an online database of keys, and then they sort of check them against them. But as you can see there, we are now activated with the Professional Edition. So thank you so much for registering Linuxfx. Your system has been activated, and now all of the features of this version have been released. So let's start taking a look around at some of these features. And we're back. So it did actually pop up with a dialog to tell us to reboot for the changes to take effect going from the free to the Professional Edition. So we've done that and we've rebooted, and we should now be good to go, and we can start poking around at our Windows lookalike Linux distribution. So first of all, we'll start on the old desktop here. We've got a few kind of desktop shortcuts here, of course, all iconed and themed to look like a standard Windows 11 install. So we have our waste bin, we have Linuxfx Android, so I will be quite intrigued to check out how the Android support works and whether they just use something like Ambox. And then we have Microsoft Edge as our default web browser, and of course Microsoft Edge is now on Linux. And then we have our Windows sort of taskbar. So all of your icons are going to be in the central position, much like you would find on a standard default Windows 11 install. And here's our start bar. So we still have the Linuxfx register there, but we won't worry about that for too much. And here are all of our pinned applications with the recommended here. And we then have a user account dialogues, and then some quick links to our file manager, system settings, and our power options. Okay. So now if we press all apps, it should just give us a little list. It does indeed. And we'll go through what apps are actually included in just a moment. And then we have the search here as well. But it appears they also include uLauncher out of the box as well for a more sort of system-wide application file and all of that good stuff search. But for a quick example, if we wanted to launch our file manager, there we go. So search is working absolutely fine. And now we have our search button and our virtual desktop, so kind of like the multitasking, I think it's called on Windows 11. So we have our search button here, which I don't actually think is KRunner by default. I think they are indeed using uLauncher, because you still have KRunner there when you press the Alt and space. So we have two searches. Of course, we have the standard included KRunner and KDE, and now we have what does appear to me to be uLauncher. So here we can do all sorts of things. So we can search for sort of files and do web searches and do application launches. And if we go into the settings here, I think we can actually choose what indeed it is going to go ahead and search for us. So the hotkey for this one is Control and Space. And what I'd probably do is I'd remove KRunner's default shortcut and replace that with Alt Space if I was to use this as my sort of default launcher here. And now if we just go into the extensions, we can see what it's actually going to be grabbing. So at the moment we can add more extensions. So we don't really appear to have loads of additional ones from what I can see. We do have the web search. Okay, so that is your uLauncher, which is going to be bound to your Control and Space, or you can click this button right here and then that will pop it up, and it's in a nice light theme. We will check out the dark theme, and we'll also see whether this changes themes with it or if that's something we've got to do ourselves. And then we have our virtual desktops, which again, standard KDE stuff, so we can go across all of our virtual desktops like so. And then we have widgets. So let's see what they've actually done here. Okay, so just using a standard sort of widget dashboard for KDE opening up on the left-hand side there. And then we have chat, which I do believe is Microsoft Teams. It is indeed, and of course this is all supported on Linux now, which makes it quite more feel like a native Windows install, that these sort of applications are actually like supported on Linux now, so it's easier for these kind of distributions to really sort of give you that Windows feel. And then of course, you know, our file manager is indeed Dolphin. And then we have our Microsoft Edge, and then we have our store. So this is just going to be Plasma Discover, I imagine. It is indeed. So we do have some updates to grab. So let's grab those updates quickly, and then we'll carry on looking through the desktop, and then we'll check out some of the sort of Windows-like features and all of that good stuff. Right, so it's prompting us to do a restart to complete the update process in true Windows-like fashion. What we'll do though, I think HTOP is installed out of the box, so we'll use this as an opportunity to see how much RAM I'm using on a fresh boot, and then we'll carry on having a little look around. Okay, we are back. It's still telling us that we've got some updates. I won't worry about that at the moment. If it keeps popping up, I'll just update via the terminal. But as you can see here from HTOP, if we just quickly zoom in, you can see that the RAM usage, this isn't actually too bad. I thought it would be a lot higher than that with all of the sort of effects and pre-installed applications that we do have out of the box. So we're sitting at just under 800 MB, around about 793. And I think that just goes to show how good at sort of KDE is with sort of light usage of RAM these days, to be able to get this kind of desktop with all of the effects included, to be using under a gig of RAM at startup. So very happy with that. Now just beneath that, for swap file or partition, it doesn't appear that it's created us any. So if we wanted to, we could sort of post installation create a swap file ourselves, or we could have just sort of made a partition in the actual installation process. But let's close all of that off and exit this terminal, and we'll continue having a little look at the rest of our panel here. So we have please configure. I'm going to imagine that's for OneDrive. We have AnyDesk installed out of the box, which is a remote desktop viewer. We have our clipboard, which is showing the key that we copied earlier, so I'll make sure to blur that out. And then we just have standard KDE stuff like your status and notifications. Okay, so I think what we should probably do then is open up our application launcher and then go into all apps, and we'll start having a look through some of these applications and some of the Windows specific kind of stuff that we've got here. So we have the MTP for Android file transfer, we have Anti-Micro, we have AnyDesk, and then we have Teams, Cheese, CID, we have Discover, and our file manager of course is Dolphin. We have Gambas Free, I'm not too sure what that is, and then we have the GIMP image manipulation program version 2.10, and let's just have a look at what it looks like. It's a standard gimping theming there. Okay, right, let's go back into all apps and keep it moving. So what else have we got? We've got Gwenview, we have Helloa or Loa, something like that, so that's going to be our virtual assistant. So talk to a microphone. Unfortunately, we don't have a microphone plugged into here, but I think what I'll do, I'll quickly go and grab another microphone and we plug it into this, and we can actually have a look at how this voice assistant works. Right, so I've just plugged in an old webcam, so hopefully it will pick up the microphone audio from there. So what have we got? So this is the voice assistant setup. So it can execute voice commands. To be able to do internet searches by voice commands, you need to connect it to a Google account. Sure, why not? I've got a Google account we can use with this. So we're going to go ahead and press connect. So it does appear that Chrome is also installed out of the box. So this is going to open up the install for Google. So I'll pause the video here while I set this up. Right, so I've set all that up. So let's see how this is actually going to work. So what do we need to do? So list of commands. So if we say, OK Google, open Nemo. Right, so I've been playing around with the voice assistant for a good 10 or so minutes, trying different microphones, and I think I know why it's not quite working. So if I say the trigger, OK Google, you'll notice that it will actually pop up, but then it won't actually fulfill any of the following commands. So if we actually open up the command section, I think I've probably figured out why, and I don't think it will be an issue moving forward. They'll probably just need to update some of the sort of launch commands. Right, so I'm just in the process of editing this video now, and I've got to the assistant part, and I thought I'm going to try it one more time just to see if maybe I was doing something wrong. So we'll see if we can get it to open. Now I've got the commands open here, and as you can see, we've got things for terminal and console, and we've also got Word. So we know we've got all of these applications on this machine, so we're going to try it with that. So we need to say the trigger word and then open, and then the application we're trying to open. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, OK Google, open Word. And as you can see, it's really struggling to sort of pick up the command. So we're now going to try it over terminal. So OK Google, open terminal. Nothing. And now we'll try it with console just once more. So we'll let that go. OK Google, open console. Nothing. And you see here it says show commands or open commands. That doesn't appear to really do much either. So OK Google, show commands. Nothing. So for me on my machine, the assistant is just not working no matter what I've tried. So that's unfortunate, but there we go. So we'll go back through to the actual applications now and see what else we've got. So that was Helloa, which is their voice assistant, which uses sort of Google voice assistant as a back end. And then we have our info system, we have K3B, we have Kcalc, so we do have KDE sort of connect there to connect our Android devices. Kmail is our default email client, and then we have console with the sort of Windows terminal kind of icon there. Let's keep it moving. Now if we go back into all apps, I just want to see some of the Windows specific ones, and we will go through their own settings because they've done something quite interesting to make it look and feel like a sort of Windows control panel. Okay, we have a Linuxfx Android. Let's test this out. So Linuxfx didn't find an Android image or virtual disk installed on your device. Do you want to refresh the image list to download an Android image? Let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and go for, right, so it's found Prime OS, which is actually an operating system you can use on sort of 86 platforms. So I guess we're just going to press that and do a download image. Yep, sure. And there we go, so it pops up here. So I'll pause the video while this is setting up and then we'll come back once that's finished. Right, so it's found the image there that it's going to go ahead and download for our Android sort of compatibility. It looks like it's going to be quite a slow old download there at 2 days. Good old SourceForge, if that's where they're getting it from. I'll leave it for a little while, we'll see how we do. If not, we'll have to just skip over that for the moment. Right, so we can have a bit of a change of plan. So as we can see here, it's currently saying it's going to take 2 days and 14 hours to download the Android image. However, I've managed to find the actual sort of repository for their Android files, and we've actually managed to go ahead and download it with a different mirror at a sort of reasonable speed. So I think what I'm going to do is see if this will work. I'm just going to cancel this off, and then I'm just going to manually copy this file over into the path that it wants and see if it'll accept that, and hopefully we'll be good to go. So bear with me. Right, so what we're doing now, we've removed the original file that it tried to download, and we've just gone ahead and copied our completed downloads into the exact same path that it was asking for. So now we're just going to close this off and try and open it again and see what happens. This isn't the greatest sort of user experience, so hopefully they could use a different mirror or something as opposed to the ones that we had there, but we'll see how we go. So we've got a locally installed image now, so it has recognized that we've got this image. So here we have the option to start the system. So let's close some of this off now, so at least I know that it has accepted the image that we've manually downloaded and copied over. So launch Android with support for games. When starting the system with this option checked, the mouse will be stuck in the Android system. This way you will not be able to interact with the Linuxfx desktop. Right, so we've got a locally, so do we need to create a virtual disk? I guess we do. So let's go ahead and create a virtual disk. So it's checking the image, please wait. This procedure will create a virtual start disk to start Android. Okay, let's do it. So it's now creating the disk. Right, so our virtual disk has now been successfully created. So let's go back to start system and see if we can actually start the system. It does not appear that we can. Right, let's close this all off once more. Let's go back into it. Linuxfx Android. And now we have the option to start Android for Linuxfx. Okay, we had to take a roundabout way to get there. Your luck might vary depending on the mirror that it chooses for you when it goes through that download script. Not the most pleasant experience, but we've got there in the end. So let's see what happens now when we start Android for Linux. Okay. Right, so I see what it's doing here. It's basically just creating you like a virtual environment for Prime OS, which is an x86 64 operating system, so you can use this on any machine. You can download the ISO and install it on a machine, and this will give you kind of a desktop Android operating system. So not quite what I expected it would do, but I guess it's a nice feature to have baked into it. There's just some things I think they need to tidy up in the actual process of getting to the point that we're at. But there we go, we can see that it has gone ahead and created us a sort of Prime OS image. And I'm sure people have used this before, but here we can actually go ahead and use Android applications. You have the Play Store and all of that good stuff. So not a bad idea. I think some rough around the edges and loose ends that need to be tidied up a bit, because that process for me wasn't user friendly whatsoever. I know it was meant to be with the download script, but like I said, SourceForge has a habit of choosing funky little mirrors that will just take forever. And if you can't go in there and change that yourself, then I can imagine a few new users would get a bit annoyed with that and probably wouldn't know what to do like we just did to get around those steps. But there we go. So we do get a working Android environment with Play Store support there. So not too bad. So in my honest opinion, the way they've actually set up Android here isn't probably the route that I expected them to go, or that I would have hoped they'd have went. I would have probably just stuck to using Ambox. You can still install Play Store through that and get the Play Store with Android apps all working, and then you can launch them almost as if they felt like a native application in your system, as opposed to actually having a separate installation here of Prime OS. So again, not the way I would have done it, but it's an interesting approach that they've taken there for the Android support. Right, so now that we have finally got that out of the way, I spent far too much time on that I would have liked to, but we got there in the end. So we have the Linux power off options, and this is basically just their own little dialogue to flash up when you want to shut down and stuff, to give you more of that Windows kind of vibe. And of course, that application will be bound to here. So every time you go and shut down, you are still going to get that kind of Windows sort of feel. And we have options here for power off, change user, exit, suspend, and restart. Okay, let's get back into it. We'll have a few more run through of some of the other applications, and then we'll just start playing around with the desktop and see how well it kind of does mimic that Windows look and feel. We then have Linuxfx register, which we have done. We have the Linuxfx store, which again does appear to me just to be Plasma Discover from what I can tell. And in terms of sort of Flatpaks and Snap support, I did see something flash up about Flatpak. So we do have Flatpak installed. We know we have no Flatpak applications installed. And now let's see for Snap. So we have both Snap and Flatpak support enabled out of the box, just none of the applications are distributed by like that by default. Okay, so here's where you're going to do most of your package installations. If you're going to use a GUI, or of course being based on Ubuntu, we can just pop open a terminal and use apt. Okay, so that's our store. So again, pretty much just Discover from what I can tell. And then we have the Linuxfx WX desktop update. Okay, let's see what happens here then. So it's going to open up a little dialog and then disappear and then open up a new one here. So we have the installed system. We've got the newest versions here, but I guess when there was an update found, we just click update and then you have your own little updater built into your desktop with a nice little GUI. Okay, that's not too much of a bad idea. Let's close that off and keep it moving. So I think for the most part, that is going to be most of the Linuxfx own suite of applications. And of course, we had the assistant as well. Now, I'm going to give my brief opinion on the sort of Linuxfx stuff. So insofar as the Android stuff, like I mentioned before, I think it's a novel way of doing it. I do think that probably should have just stuck with Ambox though, to be honest, in my personal opinion, and then run Play Store through that if you're on Google Play apps available. The sort of register program was fine. It worked absolutely fine with the key that they provided. The store, again, is just Discover. The desktop update looks like it would work absolutely fine, nice and easy. Now, insofar as the assistant, I actually don't mind the idea of assistants. I think it's an interesting approach to use Google as the back end. I know it didn't quite work with our desktop applications, but I'm going to imagine it will all be ironed out. Because like I said, the trigger worked absolutely fine. Every time we said the trigger words, the pop-up would appear, but then it wouldn't actually initiate any of the following commands. But I think that's something that just needs to be tweaked to work with the sort of application suite that we have on KDE. I could be wrong, but not too bad of an idea. And I guess at least it was actually picking up our sort of trigger words to pop open the assistant itself. Now we're going to move on to their sort of web apps, if you like. So obviously being a Windows sort of clone, if you like, to sort of replace that for a Linux user, we're going to have all of these sort of web applications here for your Microsoft Office suite of applications. So very quickly, you're just going to click one of them open, and then it's going to open up the sort of Word Online sort of web application. And it will of course have web applications for every application in that suite. And then things on Microsoft Edge will be a native application as well as Teams. And then we have Microsoft PowerShell as well. There we go. So it's going to open up PWSH inside of your console. Interesting. Okay, what else have we got in so far as applications here? And then we're just going to start playing around with the desktop. I think we've covered all of the unique features here. Oh, OneDrive. So let's see how OneDrive's going to work. So it's going to open up here, and then it's going to ask us to configure OneDrive. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pause the video and I'll set up a little dummy account and we'll see how this works as well. Okay, so we have now synced our OneDrive account. So we should now be able to go ahead and click View Files. And there we go. This will be a completely empty account as I don't really use OneDrive, but as we can see here, we should be able to go ahead and create a new folder. We can indeed. So actually, I quite like the fact that it's a nice and easy setup there, and it will just sort of set it all up for you to be able to access it within your sort of default file manager, which for us on KDE Plasma is of course Dolphin. So not too bad with that. And then so far as other applications, we have OBS Studio, Ocular, and then if we wanted to use an actual native application for our sort of Office needs, it does come pre-installed with only Office. We then have Oracle, we have a remote desktop client. We actually have Steam pre-installed out of the box, which is very nice to see if you want to get up and running and playing your games. We have an alternative package manager, a GUI package manager, which is Synaptic, one of my favourite sort of package managers for sort of Ubuntu, Debian kind of files. And new launcher was indeed this little bad boy launcher right there. And I think for the most part, that's all of the applications. And now what we're going to do is spend a bit of time just going through the actual sort of way that the applications will look in both the light and dark themes, and also checking out their own settings, because they actually do have their own settings here. So of course we have the standard KDE system settings, and then we have settings for them. It's currently saying Linux is not activated, although we know it is. Let's see what, there we go. Just needed a refresh. So little things like that I do think need to be sort of ironed out and sort of working better. And of course we do have full sort of wine support as well to install any of your Windows applications you might want as well. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can actually use these settings. So we're currently just in system. We then have Bluetooth, so it's meant to again look all like sort of Windows-esque kind of settings here. But let's go down into customization now and check out some of the different theming. So what I want to do is open up Kate, because I think that's going to be our default text editor to look like Notepad. Not quite. So let's go ahead and apply a dark theme now. Okay, it didn't appear to actually set the dark theme there. Interesting. Again, little things like this I do think need to be ironed out, especially if you're charging a premium for the professional edition. Right, so what we've had to do, as the sort of theming wasn't working for some reason in their own settings, we've just gone into the sort of global theme for the KDE system settings, and here we've actually been able to enable the dark theme, and it does look really nice if you're into that kind of Windows kind of vibe. So I'm not going to hate on there. There are just things that do need to be resolved in the overall distribution itself. So certain things aren't quite working the way one would expect, and like I said, if you're charging a premium, you really need to iron these things out if you're going to be selling a professional edition. But with that out of the way, let's actually have a look at how this dark theme is going to look now. Nice, the Dolphin's looking pretty decent. Let's open up, let's open up the Discover Store now and see what that looks like with the Windows dark theme. Okay, I do actually like they've managed to get the rounded corners there as well. And of course you won't get the Windows-like snapping, but you do get a nice four-way split when you're using a KDE Plasma desktop anyway. Okay, let's have a look at a couple more applications before we start to wrap this up. So if we go back into all apps, let's just open a load of apps now and see how the dark theming is going to take effect. So let's go back to Kate this time. There we go. And let's open up one more application and see how it looks. So what have we got? Let's go ahead and open up. Let's open up the Only Office Word application and see if that's taken effect with the dark theming. It hasn't. So Only Office does their own sort of system theme, application theming, and it's meant to really look like Windows, Microsoft Office applications. So in the light theme, that would look very nice on your actual desktop, and again, quite easily fool you into thinking that you might be using a Windows operating system. Like, I reckon I could install this on a random laptop and then just sort of let people have a look at it at a glance. And I think, you know, 9 times out of 10, if they're not aware of these kind of operating systems, they would think this is a standard Windows install. Okay, so I think we'll start to wrap it up. Let's just open up one more application and just want to see if ULauncher has changed the theme for us. No. So if we go into the settings, I imagine if we manage to change the theme in the actual settings for Linuxfx, it probably would have changed this theme as well. But while we're here, let's jump over to the dark theme now and now have a look at what the dark theme looks like with the rest of the desktop. Perfect. Okay, I think we've looked at everything now. I think what we will wrap it up with some final thoughts. Okay, so that's been our look at Linuxfx 11 featuring the KDE Plasma desktop, themed and modified to really look and feel like a Windows 11 system. And for the most part, I do actually think they do a very good job of making it look and behave almost exactly like a Windows system. The theming, I think they've actually done perfectly. I wouldn't know if I was looking at this just from a glance that this wasn't actually Windows 11. There are a few things that did annoy me during our little run through that I think these things definitely do need to be ironed out if you are going to be, you know, selling a separate professional edition. But for those of you that are curious and want to sort of try this out, I would actually say just go ahead and download the free edition and see what you think. Bear in mind, at the moment, I don't think it's quite there yet to really be asking for a sort of professional license, because there are just a few things that aren't correctly set up out of the box. For their Android implementation, I don't hate the idea. I just think that if you're going to be relying on downloading something from online in a little download script like they were, make sure it's got some sort of selection for the mirrors, or just maybe host it somewhere else where you can, you know, very comfortably download it in a sort of normal time frame. Because like we had to do, going onto the actual SourceForge page for them and selecting our own mirror and then deleting the one that they'd already tried to download and then going in and copying it over to a terminal. A lot of people aren't going to want to do that. So just iron that out a little bit. For the assistant, I'm not too annoyed about that because it did recognize the trigger and it did pop up. I just think that they need to do some work with the sort of launch commands for certain applications. I imagine it will work very well on the Cinnamon desktop, as in the actual command list it does show things like Nemo. So again, little things like that definitely do need to be ironed out. Like I said, this isn't my kind of operating system. I wouldn't use this. I use Linux because it's Linux, not because it's trying to be something else. But I do think there is a place for these kind of distributions in the overall Linux environment. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And if you've really enjoyed it, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Join the Discord. There's a link in the description below, as well as in the pinned comment. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.